So here's another here's another really cool thing to play with. We've seen in the prior tutorial how to build a gradient like this if you have a photograph with the perfect colors that you saw at the sunset maybe, and you took a picture and you needed to blur it out a little bit. The original might be a little bit blurry. This one is stretched and it still has a little bit of stretch marks going sideways, up and down. But one thing I'd like to do also is to add a star field, and I want to show you how to create something that looks a little bit like a random star field. It's actually great when the image that you have here does have some grain or some noise in it. If it doesn't, you can certainly add some with the noise filters. But let's assume we have enough there, and I want to show you how you can use a 3D lighting effect to create kind of a random star field. And then we'll compose that with the sunset picture. So the first trick here is to go to the stylize, I think, there it is, lighting tool. And in there you'll see that you can move your light source around. Let's make it go up really high, so we don't really have much of that immediate lighting on it. In fact, let's keep it a little bit there, but one thing you can do is you increase the specularity. Okay, and now get rid of that. Bring the light distance really up high, and the intensity you can bring it down a little bit. But the key thing is to work with the gloss and the specular. So specular will change the intensity of that specular highlights. The gloss will make it flat or just very tight, very narrow. And now you have a star field appearing here. And you can further adjust perhaps how bright it is, and if you even see any of that bluish gradient behind it. There's a couple of more controls you might want to play with for that. As you move the light around, you might still discover perhaps some parts where some of that original image is showing. You can play with the smoothness, probably not want to go too smooth because that will show some of the gradients there again. But you do notice you can also multiply by the original. The highlights, I mean the specular will not show that. That really would be the case if you had some of that showing here. Then you would see a grayscale or a color image. But we want to focus on those specular highlights. So let's keep that specular up and the light intensity down. You do have to have some amount of light. I mean, if you bring it down to very low distance and no intensity there, then you'll see that you get a very narrow field effect. That's actually pretty neat too. If you need some sort of a supernova or a bright star surrounded by some twinkly stuff, some other great effects you can have with that. You can create like globular clusters, star clusters of that sort, and very quickly create sort of a random set of pixels of different brightness and distribution. I mean, it's not totally random, it's affected by the noise that you have on that background image, but it's a good starting point. So let's see if we have some sort of a picture we can use for that. Texture height can also affect what sort of reflection you get there, what sort of specular highlight. Play with that a little bit until you get a nice distribution the way you like it. And at this time I think what I'll do is maybe play with the intensity down a little bit like so. Alright, so I have a fairly decent distribution of stars here. It's not perfect by all means, but it's plenty of them. One thing I want to do now, of course, is to store that, because I might go back to that. You might reduce the intensity perhaps with the filter adjust value, perhaps bring it down a little bit, perhaps change the brightness here or there. So all sorts of other controls. Here's another one I did earlier. I'll use that one from now for the rest of the tutorial. And let's go close this one. So what I'll do is I'll load this one into the swap buffer. This one here is going to be the sky where we want the pixels, the star to be added, but that will be in the main buffer. You can see here we're on the main buffer, so I'm going to toggle to go to the swap buffer, click on that stored copy and toggle back to the main buffer. So now we have that in the star field in the swap buffer, and the main buffer is over here with the image going from reddish, going in a vertical direction now for the gradients. So now how do we combine the two? You could basically just click here to blend the two together in an additive mode, for instance. But that's not necessarily what will give you the right results, because you want the stars to be seen on the upper part. You don't want them to be seen on the lower part where it merges into too much brightness. So what you really should do probably is experiment with this here. There's a filter, combine with swap, and one thing you could do is just mix the two buffers. Right, but again, that's not quite the answer yet, because you can mix from one buffer to the other. You got the swap buffer image here, you got the main buffer, and you can go in between, but that's still going to show the stars all the way down to the bottom, to the horizon. So one more thing that we need is to kind of blend or make a transition of how much blending we actually allow there. Now that's going to be in the alpha channel, right? So the selection mask basically needs to have a gradual transition where it's fully allowing the blending up here, and it's fully disallowing or preventing the blending on the lower part, and do a transition, a gradient on that. This color gradient could actually be used for that, but we might as well just use another tool. And what we'll do is we'll simply go to this rainbow tool here, where we have a couple of gradient related options. One of them is the linear selection fader tool. And what you do is you fade a selection. You say from the top it's fully selected, let's say around here, and then you start fading down. Make sure you go down in a vertical way and stop somewhere before the bottom of the image is reached. So you do have an area where it's just not allowing any update at all. Right, and so now you have, and I'm a little bit crooked here, I'm going to undo that, Control D, do that again, perhaps something like here. You know, you could actually use the stipple pattern or the plaid pattern that's showing on the transparency mask there to see if you can stay in it, and that will allow it to be somewhat in a vertical axis. Close enough. Alright, so now I have, this is the 50% demarcation line here, where it's 50% selected, and above it it's going all the way to fully selected, and below that it's going to not selected at all. And so what we can do is now we can add that filter again. We can use the filter to combine with the mix, but this time as we mix, we say, yeah, let's give it 100% of the swap buffer, or none of that, 100% only of the main buffer. But as we do that, it's still respecting the swap the alpha channel, the selection mask. And so what you can see is that the stars are showing quite nicely up here at the top. You can go all the way to 100% if you want, or a little bit less if you want more atmospheric dominance. And but they're definitely disappearing here, and at some point you just don't see the stars anymore coming in, because the alpha channel is preventing that. So that's how you can do that. Control D to get rid of the alpha channel at that point, and so now you have some nice starry skies. You know, when you zoom in, it looks a little bit odd. Sometimes they're not exactly just points, but attribute that to atmospheric disturbance if you must. And you know, that's this particular part. You could always embellish that with a little bit more, perhaps add some nova, or how about the lens flares, and create a nice little sunsetty thing, some additional lights like so, and make it look a little bit more special that way. Let's do an undo, and let's see what sort of oh, this one here might be pretty good. Yeah, so you know, this is how you can create perhaps that sort of image pretty quickly, with just blending the two together, but using an alpha channel to allow blending in the upper part of the atmosphere where the stars will show, and less blending or no blending at all below a certain line on the horizon. Alright, thanks for watching.